Cool. Well, for those of you that were here earlier today, you know that I'm sitting next to someone from my favorite company in the world. I never thought I could fall in love with a company. I guess that makes me some sort of a fan, but I'm the first Tencent fanboy, I guess. Why not? So Randy Lee, who is here with us, and he's last week during GDC or 2 weeks ago, we also met with Dan Brody, who had been on the original agenda, in case you're wondering how Dan became Randy. Dan is wherever the hell he is in the world, somewhere. Where's Waldo? Randy is stationed out here in Palo Alto. He's the head of business development for North America, very involved in running the gaming effort here in North America. Was at CrowdStar, a company you heard referred to earlier, when Glue was up giving their talk. And Randy was very involved in their international expansion at CrowdStar, their partnerships and their distribution, their licensing. And it's actually really, I think, safe to say, one of the early free-to-play American mobile games. So kind of an important part of the history of mobile games. So tell us, what led to Tencent? How did they find you? How did you find them? And kind of what drove you to want to be at Tencent?
Yeah, I think, I was at CrowdStar at the time. Actually, a recruiter reached out to me and said there was a position open at Tencent to lead business development for us. So just real quick on Tencent, there's really three pillars that me and my team focus on, right? It's developer relations. We're within the Interactive Entertainment Group, IEG, so it's pretty much everything games, game platforms, gaming-related things within the ecosystem. So it's developer relations. We focus on licensing, whether it's game licensing, IP licensing, and investments. So those are kind of the three pillars that we kind of drive out of. Headquarters for Tencent is Tencent America out of Palo Alto, but my team's kind of, there's people in New York and LA and Seattle. Recruiter came out to me and there was an opportunity to join Tencent. 3 years ago, I think Tencent probably in the West was a lot less visible potentially. We hadn't done a lot of deals per se.
Unless you were playing League.
Unless you're playing League and you're a big Riot fan, but we just kind of started thinking about the West a little bit more, so I thought it'd be a good opportunity to join the company. And it's been a great ride. It's over 3 years now, and what I would say is that we're always doing new things and we're always kind of exploring and learning as we go. So that's been my 3-year experience here.
Were you already a China expert?
Yeah. So one of the reasons they brought me to CrowdStar was to help on global expansion. So I brought one of the games out to Japan and did a deal there. Did a deal in Korea, and so our first free-to-play mobile game was Top Girl at CrowdStar, free-to-play girl game that I actually brought to Tencent. So I kind of start meeting the folks then. I've always kind of been doing this Pan-Asian, China, US thing. So it worked out well. Preferred
airline?
Unfortunately, it's United. They've been getting much better, but out of San Francisco, United's kind of one of the main options, right? So I am a United fan.
Though a Singapore first class seat will beat the entire business first section.
I do like Singapore. One of the first times I flew it, I remember it was over the holidays. They put these little nice red flowers kind of along the side. It's just an extra little touch that you'll see on Singapore that you don't really see anywhere else.
You don't see any touches on United.
No.
Everybody agrees with us. Well, so I mean, I know Tencent's a worldly company and not ancient traditional Chinese company, but it's still an Eastern-based company. You're a Western-based office. What's that like culturally? I mean, is the Tencent culture kind of worldwide, or is it kind of a different culture in China and a different culture in the States?
Yeah, so very different. I mean, before I joined Tencent, one of the things I thought about was, this is a big Chinese company. I'm Chinese, I'm American-born. I can speak Chinese, but I still knew it was a little bit different culturally. What's great about us is I feel like from Tencent America's standpoint, we're about 130 people. So it feels like a startup, but we have the resources of a very large company in China that can help us do things that we need to do. And then if I look at the Chinese companies within China, I think we're probably, from an executive management team's perspective, is very Western, right? Like you've met James, our CSO. He's Westerner. Martin's Westerner. Brett Lawrence, our general counsel, he's Westerner. So it's actually a pretty Western, diverse
These
executive
guys actually live
management
in
team.
Hong Kong, most of
Yeah,
them, don't
yeah,
they?
yeah, yeah.
I don't
So-
want to give away their private life, but the fact of the matter is these men are predominantly living in Hong Kong.
A lot of them do live in Hong Kong, and they could commute over the border.
Yeah, it's a very short distance if you're not familiar with the.
Yeah, so it's actually from an executive management perspective, it's fairly Western. And then within IEG, we used to, years ago before I joined, we had some Facebook games that were running. So IEG, our business group's actually been out west probably longer than some of the other business groups.
How long? So you were not like the early wave of employees in the U.S. or
No,
was it a
I
group
mean
before you?
I've 3+ years at Tencent. Probably there's another 3-4 years before that when the teams were just kind of out here trying some Facebook games and things like that.
And the guys that did the Riot deal were part of that U.S. operation?
Yep. Yeah, so that was also before my time.
Uh-huh. And then when you came in 3.5 years ago, were you involved with Riot too, or
No,
all
no.
the other aspects?
That deal was already done.
Complete. All the tranches were.
I wouldn't say all of them were finished, but we already had our operations team working with them tightly in terms of bringing the game to China. So like that, once we sign a licensing deal, we have operations. Our operations publishing team work with the developers, our partners, and then that kind of starts to flow, and then that basically becomes the tight relationship there.
And how would you compare the bureaucracy, if you will, to your experiences in the States with big companies? Is it lean and efficient, or is it a big company which is inevitable? Or?
Yeah. I think what's interesting about Tencent is it is a big company, right? We have 30,000 plus people. We have a lot of processes, but I've never seen a company this size move as quick as we move when we have to move. So sometimes we move slow and we kind of go through our processes and things like that. But other times we're the fastest company I've ever seen, faster than a startup, being able to mobilize various different teams and orgs to get something done. Because once the decision is made to go do something, like everyone picks up, drops everything they have and they just all kind of go for one target to move it. I think if I was to think about, when Tencent was looking at the mobile ecosystem back in China a few years ago, we were a little bit late to the market. But once it became clear that the mobile gaming ecosystem was there, right, the devices are out there, users are playing it, like we were able to pivot thousands of developers, like pretty much overnight, like, okay, do mobile, right? And just boom, make the move. So I think from an execution standpoint, yeah, we are big. There's a lot of processes, and I report into Shenzhen, so there's quite a lot of things a lot of communication that has to happen, and sometimes it's a little bit slower than we like. But when we have to move, I think we're just as fast as a 50-man startup.
And you can get quick decisions.
Very fast.
Driven through the C-level staff. It is it is a company with a remarkable C-level staff. So, and I guess they're all kind of it's largely the same group, right? It's the same
group.
guys that have.
They all play games, and that wasn't the other surprise. Was when I joined, I didn't realize that everyone's a gamer, right? Martin games, James games, like everyone. Stephen Ma, our senior VP, major gamer, knows all the games. He's played everything. Like I remember there was a company in South America, they're doing this type of game. We're like, hey, there's this game out there. It's like, oh no, I've played them all. I really like it, right? It's like, well, so it's that was a pleasant surprise that, within, people think of Tencent as this conglomerate and we have a lot of divisions, and that we do, but at the DNA level, we're actually a gaming company. Everything else kind of supports it. So it's been great.
And you obviously, as a public company, you've revealed all this. In fact, is a majority of the revenue gaming, or
It
is
is.
it? It is. And that would be followed by WeChat?
WeChat doesn't really monetize. Obviously, we're touching a lot of different areas now. Whether
So all the money for the
ad-
for the in-app purchases and the games.
it's
the
all
free-
interactive.
It all goes
It's all
IEG.
called value-added services. Yeah.
Okay. So WeChat's basically a platform that supports all of your revenues.
Yeah, it's a great platform for us, right? So yeah, we view it as a platform for engagement.
How many of you have used WeChat? Only when you've gone to China? I find people don't even put their email addresses on their cards anymore.
Oh, for China?
They just put their WeChat.
Yeah, it's WeChat.
And they
Yeah,
just,
it's kind of
and
the
everybody
default.
expects you to have your code.
Yep.
All right, let's talk a little bit about investments. You guys are in the news every now and then with an investment here and an investment there. There are probably people in the audience that would love to bring you, small, new, early studio or some other type of possible investment or other deal. Can you give us a sense of the kind of things you guys are looking for?
Yeah, so a few years ago, we probably And that's the thing about us is we typically we learn a lot, so we kind of engage with the market, we look at it, and then we change. We never stay stagnant in terms of our thinking and how we operate. So a few years back, most of our deals were probably the larger ones that you know of. So the kind of the pocket gems investments and the glues investments and things like that. But over the last 12 months, we've started engaging into smaller deals. When I say smaller, $3 million and down and $6 million and down, and earlier stage, right? One of the things that we really want to focus on is innovative gameplay. So those are things that are interesting. And before we would never look at a paper pitch, but now we actually are considering deals at a paper pitch stage because we look at the team, we look at their track record, we look at the game or the game idea and where they want to take it, right? So we have a pretty good view on the market. We're always learning, but if there's an interesting game that's very innovative, we think that's beneficial to the industry, right? Because the games that are out there, and I'll think about like mobile, right? The mobile ecosystem is tough. It's a tough business. But if we can help fund a company that's going to innovate in the space, it's definitely going to be very hard work and create something new. You'll bring more users to the player base, and then with that, it'll grow the base. So I think that's kind of how we think about it. The recent success of Fortnite Mobile and PUBG is one of these things that we think about a lot because shooters in the West have been dominant. I mean, in China, right? Everyone plays shooters on mobile, and in the West, no one's been able to crack that nut. I mean, there are some companies out there, and Glue was one of them, working on these things, but it's been hard. So, but we think of it as blue ocean, right? We think of it as creating a new genre or creating players being able to want to play a mobile shooter in the West, and we hope PUBG and Fortnite is just kind of the beginning of that. Now, more developers, whether they're backed by us or not, we think it's beneficial that they'll now go, okay, look, there's some successes. They're getting downloads. Players are playing these games. They're getting used to it. So their next shooter that they launch, someone who's maybe played PUBG that wants to try something else, they're going to try it. Whereas, I think 6-8 months ago, 12 months ago, people look at shooters and they go, it's probably, it won't work, right? And they just don't even try it.
So from a gaming background, are you only interested in looking at mobile
No.
pitches or PC too?
PC as well. I mean, we think innovation can come from.
Non-console.
I guess when you say console, I feel like console and PC is kind of melding now, right? A lot of the PC guys are on console, right? Epic's on console. Yeah. High res for us is on console and PC. So it's not really I don't know if there's a pure console play anymore, right?
Okay, and what about tools and publishers and things like that? Are you interested in looking at those, or are you really focused on innovative gameplay from studios?
Yeah, so where we kind of think about, we're kind of more of a B2C company, so we really think about content first. If you have the good content, everything else around the ecosystem will grow, right? So, I know we hear a lot of things about esports and stuff, and there's games like, oh, we're going to do esports for it. But for us, let's look at the game first, because if the game is great, then the ecosystem around that whole game will work. Tools, I think the viewpoint is what can this tool become? Can it become a platform for users down the road, potentially? So it may fit in our wheelhouse, it may not. Maybe we can refer them over to Epic, and maybe there's a play there with UE. So it's hard to say. I think on the tool side, we just have to understand what the founder's vision is on that tool.
So the major big investments have been Epic, Glue, obviously Riot.
Supercell
for sure.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that deal? I think there's maybe some I think there's a lack of understanding about the nature of that as a consortium and whatnot.
Yeah, so I didn't work on that deal specifically. So yeah, it is a consortium. The investor wanted to sell, and we were interested in Supercell. We like the way they innovate on mobile and the way that they operate. And if you think about them in the mobile ecosystem, they're one of the most creative out there, right? So again, that was one of the drivers for Supercell. It wasn't in my territory, but yeah, I guess that's structurally wise. It's a little bit different than kind of the typical deals that we've done.
And they own, I believe, a majority position in SpaceApe.
Yeah, they've done a SpaceApe.
So you're therefore, through that consortium, an investor in SpaceApe Games also.
I guess so.
And that's part of it. And then I think,
I mean, Riot's making investments as well, right?
Is that right?
Yeah, they've invested in Rob Pardo's Bonfire Studios, right? That's a Riot deal, which is great. Like in our mind, it works well for everyone.
They're fairly independent on that sort of thing.
Of course.
Of course.
Yeah, that's how we operate.
And what's the process? If someone wants to reach out to Tencent, let's just say because of the nature of where we are today, it's a US-based startup of some sort. They reach out to you?
Yeah, and then I have a team here that looks at various deals.
And you've already commented on you're willing to do early. I assume you're willing to still do late.
Oh yeah, I think
Small, big.
late for sure. Early, I think, was the area that we probably weren't as familiar with and weren't as aggressive with kind of a few years ago, but now we're more willing to look at those as well. I think that the key there is that the team and then what they're trying to do, right? Like, and having a clear vision on that game. I think sometimes we hear pitches of it's going to be, this game, but reskin to this kind of thing. Like, I don't know if, I think that works for some certain people's business models, but for us, we're always thinking about blue ocean, new opportunities. And that kind of goes back to probably our original mindset when we first started doing games. We weren't even in the gaming business. There was a lot of other players in China that were doing games. And the whole ecosystem was MMORPGs. Everyone had 25% market share there, and we were the small fry. But what we did was we looked at blue ocean. We looked at, we brought in Crossfire from Korea, right? We brought in MOBAs. We brought in sports games with the licensing of NBA 2K and FIFA. Like, these were things that China players never played. But in our mind, playing games, whether you're in China or you're in the West, if you like the gameplay, you like the game, you're going to play it. Leagues kind of proved that. Shooters have proven to be successful in China when it wasn't before.
Warcraft effectively proved that.
Warcraft did it. So, it's, and I think that's kind of how we think about things from an ecosystem perspective.
And you think there'll be more opportunity for Western games to come in successfully to China?
Yeah, I think so. PUBG is the latest, right? It's done amazingly well.
There's starting to be a pretty long list, actually.
Yeah. Again, it's the gameplay that I think the Chinese player understood and they play and they really adapted to. Sometimes what's different is, we talk about sci-fi or Star Wars and not being big. It's only because it's the cultural thing that they didn't grow up with it, right? The Chinese gamer never grew up with watching Star Wars or being around sci-fi. So it's not like they don't like the game per se. It's just the environment they grew up in was different than kind of what we grew up in the West.
So that sort of mythical IP may not be as strong in China, but it's not that they're being rejected because they're Western. They're just not as deeply ingrained in that.
Right.
In that.
Culturally or historical growing up phase, right? Yeah.
Now, what about the flow in the other direction? Will there be, in your opinion, have there been successful Chinese games in the U.S. market?
I would say if you look on the mobile side, there's quite a few Chinese developers who have done well in the West, right? Companies like FunPlus who have kind of Chinese mechanics, or Machine Zone, right? Asian mechanics that they've brought out West that's been successful. PC-wise, not as much. There's the free-to-play market whereby I think an Asian company can help a lot in terms of driving that here in the Western ecosystem. So I would say, mobile, yes, we've definitely seen it, and you'll see it in the charts. I think PC, at this point, there's not a whole lot, but hopefully that will change as well.
I feel like the Chinese mobile game companies, maybe it's true for PC too, have a lot to teach American companies in terms of marketing also. These in-game events from an American point of view, is incredibly innovative.
Yeah.
And not any. And when you say to Americans, "Oh, it's an event or something," they think you mean like Chinese New Year. But as everybody in the audience knows, these are actually manufactured events.
Yeah. So I think it's the live operations of a free-to-play, and I think the difference between maybe some Western companies and how we think about is just the curve, right? Like you'll always see these console curves of day one it's selling like this, and then it kind of drops down, and then they have maybe a DLC and it pops up and it drops down, and then something else, right? Re-engagement. So the curve kind of does this, is the tail, and it does that. We actually view it as kind of, let's start small, and then it kind of goes and goes and goes. Like one of our biggest games last year in terms of revenue-wise is a game we've signed 10 years ago, right? It's let's start. It's okay to be small. Start small. You find the core users, you find the core audience, and then you kind of grow it over time. So, I think our ideal curve is this versus this, and we think if you go this way, you can probably go longer, farther out if you do it right.
So that's actually a positive note for my friends at Super Evil Megacorp.
If their curve is doing that, then yes.
That you know, versus that,
Right,
which
right.
had been really the traditional American approach for
Right,
sure,
right.
with hit-driven kind of
Yep.
approach to all of this. Let's talk a little bit about esports, and then we're out of time. You made the comment that I think all of us who are involved in any of those games agree with, which is that first the game's got to be great and it's got to lend itself to competition and to observation. Where do you see esports developing in the United States? And more fad, more trend, more. This is the beginning of something huge.
Yeah.
Inaccurate to say it's the beginning, even.
Yeah, no, I think esports. We have all the leagues in China for many of our games, so it's definitely very important for us. Currently, we still view esports as kind of an engagement tool, right? It's for your fans, it's for re-engaging, it's for getting them to play and to see competitive gaming. We think competitive gaming is actually huge, right? Competitive gaming on mobile is a huge market opportunity. All the investments going into esports in the West, we haven't made any yet, and I think because it's not clear exactly how it's going to shake up. So we've been focusing a lot of our time still focused on the content, and it's just not sure in terms of driving revenue or driving profits. Is it a sponsorship that's going to do it? Is it streaming rights that's going to do it? Like I don't think it's clear for Tencent, at least at this moment. So for us, let's continue focusing on funding great teams and great developers and great games. The esports side will shake out. It's just not clear when that's going to happen.
And you're not here today to announce League number 2.
No, we're not.
Well, we'll look forward to that, though, I promise you. Thanks very much, and keep up the innovative gameplay.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks
for having me.